Hello, and welcome to Novato Community Television. My name is Madeline Peters, and we have a very special program here today on type 1 diabetes. And I have some excellent guests that I will introduce to you shortly. Just to remind you that this is a very special program on type 1 diabetes, and we'll be hearing from about JDRF as part of this program. So I have two very delightful people here with me today. I have Nyla Borgo and her mom, Camille, and you're going to share a little bit about yourselves. I'll have you do that, and then we'll get into the topic of today's show. So, Nyla, why don't I have you start by introducing yourself?
Well, my name is Nyla Borgo, and I'm really happy that I'm here today because I really enjoy talking to a lot of people, and I sort of can't wait to do it.
So this is a good opportunity for you.
Yes.
Good. Well, let's hear from Mom. So Camille, thanks very much for being here too.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to be here too, and just to talk about our experience with type 1 diabetes and about our experience with JDRF as well.
Okay. Well, why don't we start off with getting into it? Like, what is type 1 diabetes? Can you please provide a context for this?
Yeah, so type 1 diabetes is a condition that just comes up out of the blue. We're not sure why. It's unknown as to why type 1 diabetes happens to the people who get it, but it's a autoimmune deficiency. And so what happens is the autoimmune system attacks the islet cells that live in the pancreas, and the islet cells are the cells that produce insulin for the body. Insulin is used in the body in order to regulate glucose levels, and when the glucose levels are not regulated, then there either is too much insulin or not enough insulin in the body, and it prevents the body's ability to absorb the nutrients from the food that you eat. So in Nyla's case, with type 1 diabetes, the autoimmune system kills the islet cells, preventing the body of making insulin, and so then Nyla needs to have insulin to survive, and so she is completely dependent on getting insulin in other ways, with shots or with, she currently has a pump that gives her insulin.
So this is a big undertaking to, first of all, to discover and then try to deal with this, and especially as a young child too. So this obviously involves a lot of challenges. I want to thank you very much. You've created a nice context, especially for our viewing audience, to what this is and what this means. So can you go into what the, when was Nyla first diagnosed?
Now, do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
I was 4 years old, and it was really hard for me because I had no idea what I was doing in the hospital, and I wasn't feeling the best, and I wanted to eat food, but I just didn't feel like it. And it was pretty boring because all that I had to do was sit and watch movies and either go to the playroom, which only had books and toys, and sometimes crafts.
So how long were you in the hospital then?
I was in the hospital for, I think, 2 weeks.
That's a long time.
It was actually
Was it
5
one?
days, yeah.
Probably seemed like an eternity, and not much entertaining there, and here you are, just 4 years old, trying to figure out what's going on. So,
The hospitalization stay too for us as parents is really a lot about education, because there's a lot that is involved with type 1 diabetes and how to manage the condition. So we had to get Nyla's blood sugar levels in a safe range. They were very high because her body had stopped producing insulin. So the sugars in her bloodstream were very, very high because of that, and that can be very dangerous when someone has really high blood sugars. And then consequently, it can be very dangerous if someone has very low blood sugars as well. So it's really, the management of type 1 diabetes is really about keeping the blood sugar levels in a safe range.
Right.
And it takes constant monitoring in order to do that. So the hospitalization for us as parents was really about learning how to count carbohydrates. Every food that Nyla eats, we need to decide how many carbohydrates that piece of food has. Like an apple, for example, you'd have to weigh the apple, decide how many carbohydrates it has, do some calculations and then give insulin for the amount of carbohydrates that Nyla just ate. And it really involved 8 to 10 finger pricks a day and 6 to 8 shots a day initially. And I don't know if you want to talk about how you felt about shots.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot to deal with. And this is all happening when you're 4, is that correct?
Yeah.
So what was it like dealing with all of this at that young age?
It was really hard because, well, first of all, I was like, oh, shots are okay. And then when I noticed I'm like, the week after, it's like, oh, am I gonna have to be doing this for the rest of my life? So then I started getting really scared. But the hospital gave me like a little doll to pretend do like shots on it.
So this is the
that
doll
helped
that you
me.
had in the hospital when you
Yeah.
were 4? So did you practice giving the doll shots? Or?
Yeah, I would use the syringes and do it on my dad and the doll.
Uh-huh. So they were your practice puppies. Uh-huh. And then did that change how you felt about it? Or
Not exactly, just when I was in the hospital, it sort of made me more happy instead of doing nothing. It didn't help a lot, but it helped like a smidge.
Well, a smidge is
Beginning.
better than nothing, huh? You certainly have a really good attitude about this. So what are is there anything else that you want to say about your hospital stay, or shall we move on to something else? You know, it's like they're pretty dramatic.
It was really weird because there's like so many people there with all types of different conditions, and it was actually like strange and cool to go to this hospital and see like all the different places.
So it's quite an education, and
Yeah.
this is still when you're 4. That's quite a lot to take in when you're 4. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed.
And as parents too, with the hospitalization, like I said, there's a lot about education for what we need to do in order to care for Nyla and keep those blood sugars in range. And it was really important. I mean, you know, we left that hospitalization after 5 days, you know, with kind of eyes wide open,
Sure.
and we felt like we were going home with like a newborn baby with like zero parental instincts on how to take care of her. There was a lot of supplies and insulin, and we had to know how to draw up insulin and how to measure it right, and just a lot goes into it that your life just completely changes overnight.
That's amazing. So what are the challenges? Thank you, Camille. What are the challenges you face with type 1 diabetes, Nyla?
Needles was really hard for me, and just doing like my changes for my pump even now, it's still hard for me. Even though I've got a new pump and all that type of stuff, even if it sort of gets in like more, how would you explain it? More like more technology comes up.
Yes.
It's still not it's still not going to help you all the way.
So
still
even
gonna
all
be hard.
these advantages, this is still a hard thing to deal with. And now you're 8, right? So you've been dealing with this now for 4 years. What other things come up, like in terms of what other challenges you face? Because obviously this is monitoring your diet, and it's probably monitoring your exchanges or the times that you get together with friends as well.
Yeah, it like some people think I can't go to exactly like I have to always like carry my supplies around. It's hard for me to go like pee at school.
Yes.
Like I have to keep a monitor on my blood sugars and like all of that stuff. I have to get ready for the more actiony things that's going to happen.
So you have to monitor your blood sugar because you're going into PE that's going to demand more of you physically. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of different pieces involved with it. There's so many variables that can change the blood glucose levels. So, you know, like Nyla was talking about, if she's doing PE, she has to plan ahead. You know, if she's on the lower part of the safe range for her blood glucose levels, then we have to give her some extra sugar to kind of bump her blood sugars up, because exercise will affect her blood sugar levels. When she's getting sick, she often goes high or low with her blood glucose. Sometimes stress can affect it. Growth can affect it as a hormone. So there's a lot of different variables in terms of keeping it right in target. And I explain it as a moving target that you can never hit the bullseye. So no matter how hard you try, it's really hard to keep it in that safe range. And it takes constant monitoring and constant planning ahead.
Well, I give you both and your whole family a lot of credit for kind of rallying together and learning as much as you can and learning how to deal with all of this. So how do you feel, like at different times of the day, when you're in school perhaps, or checking your values, checking the values? What is it like for you on a daily basis?
When I'm really low, I get really shivery and scared, like I'm about to faint. I feel really nervous. And when I'm high, it's like the same thing, but I don't feel nervous. I don't feel like I'm about to faint. It's just I don't feel well.
Okay.
So another thing is when I'm high, I get really hungry and get this weird feeling where you don't know what's exactly happening, like when you get into a daze, sort of.
How do you feel around your friends when you're checking your blood sugars at school?
Well, some of them were really helpful. Like one of my friends named Eden, she's always like, "Oh, I'm Nurse Patty's assistant," and she's always like, "Okay, Nyla, what's your number?" And I think it was really kind of her to always do that. And all of them love carrying my bag and my folder, and they're like, "Oh, I could carry your bag and your folder."
So you have a lot of support then from your friends at school. So what have you done to kind of handle all this, to deal with your anxiety and your fears?
I've been to art therapy, which actually helped me a lot. And it's actually really even thinking about it and just sort of thinking about, oh, how can I make it better? How can I make it a little more easier? I can think about something else maybe. I can read a book maybe, because I love reading. Something to sort of distract me has helped.
Take your mind off of it.
Yeah.
And then that calms you down. Does that have an effect on your values as well? You can
Not really.
It's just more internal then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about your Worry Warriors
Oh, yeah.
that you made with your art therapist?
And I made Worry Warriors. So for JDRF fundraiser, we made little Worry Warriors. They weren't exactly the same. These ones we made with clothespins.
Here, let's hold it up. Let's hold it up here.
Paper.
There we go.
Paper, round.
Like
clothespins.
cylinders,
Yeah,
clothespin?
Clothespins.
And then it looks like it's wrapped with
And then you're gonna make all types of we found fabric, we did string, we did beads. We even made little necklaces, and we even made we had some really cool fabric. This was really cool, and we got to basically do whatever we want with it.
Well, then how do they help you? You made the worry dolls, but then how do they help you?
What they do is, so if you have a worry, you put them under your pillow and they take away your worry like a dream catcher. It's basically like that, but but they have the worry instead.
And so you're passing the worry from you onto your worry doll.
Yeah, and then the other thing is if you're ever in a place where you don't or you just a little guy even to just play with, you can always use them to do that too.
Okay, so that's one way to kind of handle it. Well, I want to thank you two very much for creating a context. Camille, you did an excellent job of setting the context for what it is, what type 1 diabetes is, and what it's like as a parent. And Nyla, you did an excellent job of explaining your awareness of that you're trying to figure out, even at a very young age, what was going on, and kind of telling the story of what it's like being a kid dealing with this. I do commend you very much for your ability to articulate your story. I liked hearing about your coping, the way that you cope with it, and the way that it's kind of encouraging for me to hear that your friends kind of come and rally to your side and try to kind of work with you through this. This is a big challenge. So thank you very much for being part of this. Now we're going to segue into another segment to provide more of a context of what this is all about. But again, thanks to Camille and to Nyla for being here. Well, we're back here, and actually, Nyla, you mentioned Nurse Patty, and we have Patty Capretta, who's here to create another context. Again, you brought up what it's like being in school, and you have some professional assistants at school. So, Patty, would you please give your perspective on what it's like?
Sure, thank you for having me. I'm Nurse Patty. I'm Nyla's RN healthcare liaison at her elementary school. And my role is to be with her to monitor and adjust and administer insulin, just oversee her daily care so that she's safe in her diabetic regime here at school, and hopefully to maintain the most natural kind of experience that she can at school. So as any child with type 1 diabetes, her care can change from day to day. It can fluctuate. Her sugars, as Mom mentioned, can go up or down. And in preparing her for her activities, we always check her via a finger stick. And I use a finger stick and a monitor. And then if she is low, such as before an activity, i.e. PE or recess, she might require a snack. If she's too low, she might also require glucose tablets or perhaps even juice. So those are some variable things that we use in our tool belt to make sure that she is prepared to have her activity. So we do that, and she plays and I monitor. She has a couple of devices that are real helpful to me in her school day. She has a Dexcom, which allows me to read trending of her blood sugars, but her true value of blood sugar can only be observed and monitored via a finger stick. So unfortunately, she has to have finger sticks, but she handles it like a champ. Then before any kind of snack or lunch or even a class party, we check her again, get her number, and then via her pump, I calculate a dosage of insulin to provide that to her before she eats so that it will equalize, you know, and make sure that everything works accordingly. So she'll then eat her meal. She's a fantastic eater. Mom prepares great meals, very healthy choices always, which I'm so proud of her. Then she goes about her day, plays, and everything is good. She's great about coming to me when she feels a low, right, Nyla? And she lets me know, and we assess her, making sure that if we need to adjust it, we can do it quickly so that we don't take time out of her day. She is, after all, a second grader, and she's active, and she's got a lot of pals that help out. A lot of kids in class who she mentioned are very helpful in letting us know if Nyla's not feeling well or if Nyla needs something. So it's kind of a collaborative effort. She and I are a team, and we work together. She's you know, she's got days where she's maybe not feeling well. She could be catching a cold. All these things do affect her blood sugar values. So that is why it's so important to keep an eye on things and make sure that she remains healthy and that her values remain in check and within parameters. The doctor gives us orders, and they're here at school, and we follow those orders accordingly with what to do if. So that's why I'm there. And she's an amazing little girl.
Well,
she's an
but
inspiration.
it also seems as though you have an amazing team, because
We do.
it really, this is what makes it work, that you have, you who are a very smart person who really knows yourself very well, and you're willing to share your story. That's very important, sharing your story with other people, but then also work and understanding that you need the cooperation of other people as well. So this is extremely valuable.
I've been with her since kindergarten, so we know each other well, and Mom and I are in contact as needed so that we can communicate what is needed for Nyla's care. And it's really a team effort. It's not even just so much Nyla and I, it's Nyla, Camille, and I through the day.
Well, thank you.
So,
that really becomes apparent. Thank
she's
you
an
very
inspiration.
much. You are. You are.
She really is. She's a joy to work with.
Patty, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And now we have Kevin O'Scanlan from JDRF, who's here to provide a much broader context for our discussion. Kevin?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having us here today. I work for JDRF. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I also have type 1 diabetes. I've had it for almost 30 years now. So JDRF is the global leader of type 1 diabetes research funding. So we raise money to donate to scientific studies to make this disease better, ultimately to cure the disease. That is our goal. The organization was founded in 1970 by a group of parents who were really just fed up with the lack of treatment and care. To give a little context, I think we talked a little bit about Nyla's pumps and her CGM, her continuous glucose monitors that really help her stay in balance. Back then, none of that existed. Most people would go to the doctor once a week, once a month, and get an average of their blood sugar. Insulin was around, but it was largely derived from pigs or animals, and it was inconsistent and unreliable, and you were really at the mercy of an injection that you would basically take once a day. So 1970. I was diagnosed in 1986. And at that time, things had come a long way. JDRF had been around for 16 years, and we had blood sugar meters that we could take home and test our blood sugar. We had two different kinds of insulin, one that acted really fast and one that kind of took its time overnight. But it was still a very, very challenging disease. My mother had to wake me up in the middle of the night every night to test my blood sugar. The meters themselves took 45 to a minute and a half to give a range in your sugar. And today, as we had mentioned, both Nyla and I wear a device that we can see our blood sugar from anywhere. And in fact, I know that Nurse Patty, who was just on, and Camille could actually look at Nyla's blood sugar remotely from anywhere in the world, which is pretty remarkable, especially when you consider what that does for someone's control. So we've come a long way since 1970, but we still have a long way to go. And I've seen a lot of those changes, and that is thanks to the work that JDRF does. One thing I'd also like to say, a lot of people ask this question, they say, well, we're here to talk about juvenile diabetes, and that's what we used to call it. And JDRF used to be called Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And the reason we changed the name to JDRF and we no longer refer to it as juvenile is because of our better scientific understanding of the disease. We've come to realize that this is not actually primarily a juvenile disease. Half of the new diagnoses of type 1 diabetes happen as adults over the age of 18, and more than half of the people living with this disease in the world are adults. So kind of interesting that that's a common misconception that this is the children's disease versus the adult's disease. So I hope that provided a little bit of context about.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, you just described that what your mother had to go through because you were diagnosed in the 80s. What's it like for you as an adult?
Well, it's a lot easier, but it's still a challenge. And a lot of people look at this disease as a manageable disease. But the fact of the matter is, one, it is a chronic lifetime illness. There is no cure, and that's one of JDRF's mission. And two, it's constant. It's 24 hours a day, and it's 24 hours a day for Nyla and Camille. It's 24 hours a day for me personally. And I like to tell people that this disease on its best days is an annoyance and just a constant jabbing, quite literally and figuratively. Right. And on its bad days can be very serious. And a kind of an anecdotal story I like to tell is one day I was driving into San Francisco from Oakland, where I live, and I just had my lunch and I'd just taken a shot of insulin to compensate for my meal. And anytime you take a shot of insulin, you're guessing at how many carbs versus your ratio to insulin and how much you need to break down that food into usable energy. So it's always an estimate. And there's factors like the weather, your stress, your exercise from 2 days prior, the amount of protein and the different kinds of fats in the food you ate. So all these contributing factors. I got on the bridge as we're driving to San Francisco and my blood sugar started to drop. And this wouldn't have been a problem because we were going to arrive at our destination in 15 minutes, except that there was a traffic jam and we were at a standstill.
Of course, yeah.
Right? Okay, so I just take some juice and I pump up my blood sugar and everything's okay. Well, I didn't have any juice in the car, which was my own mistake. But all of a sudden, we were in a situation where we were having a casual drive into the city that could have been very life-threatening, and I had to make a decision. If I didn't find some sort of sugar in the car, and if we got stuck here, which could be an hour, you never know. I mean, those that have driven into the city on the Bay Bridge.
Right.
And we had to decide what we were going to do to, whether it was going to get out of the car and knock on someone's window to ask for sugar or what. But the reality is it went from no big deal to very serious very quickly. And I think that's kind of an important piece that can happen at the snap of a finger.
Well, so then this was your situation. So this is, Camille, this then kind of touches on what it's like for you is you're looking out for Nyla. Nyla, fortunately, you're looking out for yourself and you have Nurse Patty, but you also play a very critical role constantly in monitoring her sugar level. So what's it like? Do you have some stories to tell about that?
Yeah, it's constant. I mean, initially when Nyla was diagnosed and she didn't have a continuous glucose monitor, that does give a warning. It gives a warning sound when she's going low or high. Before we had that, we had to set our alarm every few hours at night and check her finger to make sure she was in a safe range. Now, when we go to bed, we keep the monitor next to our bed and we just wait and listen, and it will go off if she's going high or low. So we often are interrupted at night just to check on her and make sure that she's doing okay. Not that long ago, we had given her insulin for breakfast, and she was feeling fine. She ate her breakfast, and a few minutes later was feeling sick to the stomach, and she had the flu. Well, all of the food that she had just eaten that we had given her all this insulin for was now gone. Mm-hmm. So she has all of this insulin in her bloodstream and no food.
And no food.
So things could get dangerous really fast. So we really had to, work with her doctor and figure things out quickly on what we could do to bring her blood sugars back up because they were plummeting at that point. And she was very sick at the same time, so she didn't want to eat or drink. So it's constant, and you have to plan for all scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can see that everyone has to coordinate and work together. Mm-hmm. Is there something else, Nyla, is there something else, thank you, Camille, is there something else that you want to add? Maybe with all this discussion, has it made you think of something else you want to share with our audience?
Well, I had to even go to the hospital again because I had ketones. And it was with the story, I had to go to the hospital because I went too low. And one thing that is pretty actually interesting is most people say you get ketones if you get high. Ketones is when your blood sugar is way too high or low. But it can be
high
low
or
too.
Low, right.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't, the insulin, it's not exactly ketones if you're low, but you don't have any sugar in your body and you only have insulin. So, right. But some people just think you have to go to the hospital for ketones if you're high, but it's not like that. You can do it too if you go low.
So ketones are acid. It's an acid that builds up in the bloodstream, and when you have that acid in your bloodstream, it can become very dangerous for the body. And so I think what you're talking about is oftentimes if you have ketones, it's because your blood sugars are very, very high. But for you, your blood sugar was really low. It's because you're not getting enough insulin.
Right. Okay. Well, is there something that you'd like to share, like one last comment? Kevin, from you first, and then...
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that we try to encourage people to understand is that although this disease has come a long way thanks to the management, and that JDRF is driving that, and that ultimately our goal is to cure this disease, it's still a very challenging condition for adults, for children, for parents, and for everyone involved. And so that's why JDRF's mission is to eradicate this disease in the long term, and in the short term create better therapies to make this a much more livable condition. The disease that Nyla has now versus what I was dealing with in 1986 is almost entirely different, other than the fact that it was type 1 diabetes. And we do this through a variety of things. JDRF raises money through events throughout the year. My favorite event, and actually how I got to know Nyla, was the JDRF One Walk. They've been, Nyla and Camille have been participating on a super team that we call T1D Marin, raising money for the walk. And this year they were the co-captains of that team and raised something like $60,000, isn't that right?
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So we put on this event annually. at the Great Meadow at Fort Mason. Last year we had 2,500 people join us. The event raised $1.2 million, and we have a stage presentation, a great kind of research update, and Nyla got up there in front of the entire crowd and spoke to everybody and told her story, and that was just really amazing for me to see, because she took this challenge that has been in her life and kind of wore it on her sleeve, and it was encouraging everyone out there to walk and to raise money and to make a difference.
Right, so you really felt the rallying around that you two had to do in your family context and in your school, and now with JDRF, it really is a community effort.
Absolutely.
To manage and educate and to raise funds for research. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. Nyla, would you like one last word, what you would like to share with our audience before we close?
When we did the Worry Warriors, how we raised a lot of money was we used Worry Warriors this year, so whoever gave us
A certain amount of money?
no, to even fundraise a little bit, we would give them a Worry Warrior, and we've made different things, like we made this bracelet once, and we made bookmarks, we made stickers, so every year I do something. Sometimes I even do something for my anniversary, my diabetes anniversary.
Oh my goodness. That's one way which you're celebrating your ability to handle the disease, and also that you're helping people, helping to raise funds to eradicate it. You are one brave young lady.
I usually do the thing with my friends, like
I'm sure.
friends that I know has type 1 diabetes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nyla. Thank you, Camille, and thank you, Kevin, for being here. This has been a special presentation on type 1 diabetes, sponsored by NCTV. My name is Madeline Peters. Thank you.
All right.
So what are some of the, actually it's been very interesting for me. I mean, I heard your story, and then your story about the challenges, and then your story, actually multiple stories, but just the stories that you were telling about your mom and having to wait. I mean, it's the same story that you were telling, Camille. It's really, what I get from this is the constant monitoring. You have to be very sophisticated in monitoring yourself very carefully. It also sounds like your friends know when things are not going well for you as well. So that's the message that I'm getting too from all of this too.
Yeah, the need for the monitoring hasn't changed, in that you really need to know what your blood sugar level is all the time in order to stay in have a healthy life. And I think, if I could illustrate the difference, which is today, Camille would be able to roll over in her sleep, look at her phone, and see what Nyla's blood sugar number is, and know if she's in range and if she has to go adjust or give juice or insulin or whatever the case may be. In my day, when I was Nyla's age, my mother would have to wake up, go to my bedroom, prick my finger, wait 2 minutes, get an average on the machine, and see what my blood sugar was. In addition to that, she had to wake me up every day at 5 a.m., 2 hours before breakfast, test my blood sugar, give me my insulin 2 hours before I ate, because the insulins back then were not as effective and not as quick to
as controlled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so my poor mother really was waking up multiple times throughout the night just to make sure I stayed alive. And the fact that we've made that so much easier, and most parents, I think, back then weren't really able to have their own careers. I mean, type 1 became a full-time job. Even 5 years ago, I knew mothers and parents that would have to follow their kids to school because they didn't have people like Nurse Patty, and work remotely in their car in the parking lot so that they could test their child every 2 hours at school. Now we have these devices that constantly monitor those levels, and these parents can see them from work and get notified instantly if there's a problem.
So how does that work for you then, Camille? I mean, obviously you have a very, very conscientious daughter, and you have great support at the school site, but what does this mean for you too?
Yeah, I work full-time. I have a full-time job, but Nurse Patty and I are in constant communication throughout the day. I'm getting notifications on my phone if Nyla's running high or low, and I communicate with Nurse Patty. There's a lot of different approaches on how you deal with a low blood sugar or a high blood sugar as well, so we're always talking about, how are we going to approach it this time.
So you're kind of like figuring out what the options are and trying to make those decisions together in your conversations. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And then what about for you, Nyla? What else, I mean, what's something that you didn't have a chance to say that you really wanted to share?
I think I want more people to know that type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes are the same thing, and that they're way different, and way, like, type 2 is something that you constantly get. It's your choice. Type 1 isn't your choice.
Exactly.
I love, like, acting. I really like singing too, so it's just sort of something that I love, like, really enjoy.
And what does that do for you then when you're involved in acting?
It makes me more expressed about what I really think about. I feel like it makes me a little more open.
So that helps you, huh? So all of it sounds like the arts play an important role in your kind of managing your own life and being able to kind of go on and be the 8-year-old girl that you want to be. Okay.
I think the hope, for Nyla with this condition is that she's really taken it to a level of being able to help others. And I think that that's always been kind of important to her. When there's newly diagnosed families, she and I both are involved with talking with the parents and with the kids and kind of trying to help normalize it for kids who are newly diagnosed. She's done videos that she's sent to kids just showing her devices.
This is my pump. It's one of the types of pumps. You might probably get this one.
We've done play dates to try to help them see, here's another little girl who's got the same issue that you have, and she's doing great. And I remember being a newly diagnosed family and meeting with my first parent and being like, wow, if she's like standing and like walking and talking, then maybe I can be too, because it just seems like so much in the beginning.
I can imagine it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank all of you, Nurse Patty and Kevin and Camille, and of course you, Nyla, for taking the time to be here. This has been very enlightening for me.